Very much. Good evening. It is Monday, October 30th, 2023, and we are at the Lakeville Public Library's Gallery Community Room, and we are having a Library Board of Trustees meeting in which we will have our second round of interviews with a candidate for the position of Library Director. My name is Nancy Lefebvre. I am the trustee chair. This is Patrick Marshall, a member of the Board of Trustees, and Ruth Gross, a member of the Board of Trustees. I am asking if anyone is taping, and the answer is yes, LakeCAM is taping. So I am calling the meeting to order. It's 5 o'clock. And the purpose of this meeting is to hold a round 2 interview for the position of Library Director. And we have a candidate that I am going to leave the table and go get.
Should turn my phone down.
That's a good point. Yeah. I never get calls. I don't know how that works.
Well, it was Patrick's idea. We can blame him.
What I
Oh, we say that all the time for everything, Patrick.
So we're going to have you sit here,
Okay.
and the camera is rolling. We called the meeting to order, and I would like to introduce our candidate, Jennifer Jones,
Hello.
who has applied and been interviewed by the search committee, and her name was voted to go to round 2, which is the second level of questioning. So I'm going to start off the questioning tonight.
Okay.
And then we're going to give you an opportunity to ask questions too.
Okay.
And we're going to all participate in this part. So my first question for you, if I can find my paper, here it is. Tell us about your education and professional experience.
Okay, so education, I have a bachelor's from Clark University in sociology, and then I worked for a few years before moving into the Plymouth Public Library as the library associate, and while there I decided to get the Master of Library Science degree and went to Simmons. Took a lot of classes in youth services at the time, and also some public library management classes, and the traditional, cataloging. Everybody has to take the cataloging, even though I knew I was not going to be cataloging. So, finished up went part-time to Simmons and finished up in 2010, and then have been trying to keep up with workshops and various things since that time.
Okay, great. So I think the big question is, why are you interested in being the director of the Lakeville Public Library?
Well, for one thing, I love the building. It's a beautiful spot. It seems very much oriented towards the community, which I appreciate. It also seems to have a lot of support from the community as well. And it is in close proximity to where I live, which is a big motivating factor as well, that I will be available pretty easily.
When the alarm goes off.
When the alarm goes off. I can tell you I've done that a couple times in Mattapoisett, and that's a longer drive, but, when you needed. You have to drive down there and check it out. So, but it's just nice that I am like 10 minutes away. And I think that's a benefit for both me and the library.
Okay, have you been here to meetings?
Yes, many times.
Could you describe your management style?
I like to be present and walk around, see what's going on. I also like to make sure that staff feel like they can approach me with anything, so I don't spend a lot of time in my office necessarily, unless I have to do budgeting or payroll or things like that. I like to be out where staff can see me and approach me with any issues, and also so I can see what's going on and see what may need attention.
Okay. We're going to go to Ruth next, who has some questions.
So Jennifer, it's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
How do you handle delegating tasks to the library staff so that you don't find yourself trying to do it all?
Right. It's a tricky thing sometimes because you know how you want it done, but it's important not to overwhelm and be realistic about expectations as well, what I can get done. So staff often ask me if they can help out, which is then easy to delegate the task. Oh, the website needs updating. Oh, I can do that. Do you want me to do that for you? Sure, if you could get that done. But then also certain things like say programming, ordering, I might delegate like a book club. Recently I delegated to another staff member who was part of the book club anyway, and it was like, it's too much for me to handle 2 book clubs during the month. Why don't you take this one and then I will take on the nonfiction book club that I started. So I find it easier when staff is willing to pitch in. I also try to figure out who's strong in a certain area so that I can delegate a task that I know they will be successful at doing. And so that's how I try to manage not having too much on my plate and taking it all on myself.
Can you describe your experience with developing and implementing library policies?
So when I started in Mattapoisett, it took me a couple of years before, well, I've only been there a couple of years, but a couple months before I started looking at what needed to be done. Checked Susan's, the previous director's, old list of the policies that needed to be updated and started drafting and working on some of the policies to update them or create them depending on what was needed. So I've been pretty steadily trying not to overwhelm the trustees all at once, doing a couple policies at a time or maybe 4 short ones, depending on how long they are and what needs to be discussed. So I would piecemeal, working on revising each and every one that I can. So I do have a current list of things that need to be done and still working on it.
So is this a constant that once you get to the end of the list you start over, or
I think it depends
like
on the
every
policy.
5-10 years, or
I would say at least every 5 years you probably need to look at it because things have been changing so rapidly, especially I realize the social media policy that had been done was done in 2016, I think. So there's much more new stuff that needs to be done. So trying to update that as well. And the town of Mattapoisett just came out with their own social media policy for employees. So that'll sort of guide the new update that we will do. But trying to keep up with it, I think it is a continuous process. You don't want to let your policies sit without looking at them for 10, 20 years. You want to make sure that they're updated and current as to what is going on or things that need to be looked at. So video cassettes maybe not in your collection development policy anymore, but streaming services, definitely you have to think about putting those in.
Is the library set up in Mattapoisett, or is it under the trustee control or the staff under the town guidelines? So like when the town comes out with a social media policy, does that supersede anything you have?
Yes, the town is taking the staff under its purview, though they note that the library trustees have wide leverage in how how the library is run with the collection, the policies, collections, the hours, things like that. But I think Mattapoisett's been trying to standardize a lot of things for staff, so just making sure that everyone is following a particular policy or procedure.
Throughout the town departments?
Throughout the town departments.
Could you please explain how you would go about creating an effective budget for the library? Of course, you're coming in mid-year, but...
Score, it's done.
Well, maybe not.
But the budget process is
satisfaction.
starting all
That's
over
true.
again, so I know when I have to look at what we're going to need for December in Mattapoisett. So I've looked at, the recent sales assessments have just come in, so I look at that and determine if there's a need. I know that there will be a possibility that there will be more expensive the next year, so that will factor into my thinking of how much will it go up. I try to kind of give, something like contracts or other costs, there's always increases, so kind of figure in a 5 to 10% increase at least, maybe a little more if necessary, for some line items like supplies, contracts, maintenance, things of that nature. And then the staff, most of it's already we have unions, so that's contractual, so if that's laid out in the contract, I do that. Or if I am given a directive from the town administrator, like plan for a 2% increase or a 2.5% increase, that's how that guides me with how I figure my budget numbers.
Oh, Mike.
Patrick?
What strategies do you use to evaluate the effectiveness of library programs and services?
Looking at numbers is a good way, but beyond the numbers, also anecdotal comments you might get from people about, oh, I really love that program, or the oft heard, oh, I wish I had known about that program, I would have come,
Right.
Just because a lot of people do end up not seeing everything we do, even with the amount of advertising we end up doing. So those sorts of things lead me to, are we on the right track in terms of what we're offering? Should we change up, if attendance is flagging, should we change up the day, maybe give it a rest for a couple months, come back to it? So that's kind of how I gauge it. Also ask the staff, how do you think it went? Do you think there's anything we could change? I like continuous improvement and like to think about ways that we can do things better on a regular basis anyway. So I'm always kind of evaluating services and programs.
Okay. This never happens in a library, but how do you handle difficult conversations with staff members or members of the public?
So usually would like to either have a conversation in my office, in a private area. It doesn't have to be my office. Maybe it's a little more publicly visible. Try to get all the facts as to what may have happened, if it's about an issue or what their thoughts are. A lot of stuff coming up recently about book challenges. So listening to the person about what the problem is, if I can provide a solution for it, definitely we'll do that. Or if I need to say, well, this is something that would have to be brought up with the trustees, would talk to them about, coming to a trustees meeting, having it addressed, things like that.
Have you had issues that you've had to do that with, or?
Not with public. I have had to have a conversation with HR and a staff member based on concerns and performance. But we just, handled that with HR, so brought in, I would bring in anybody that needed to be brought in. If it was a staff issue, maybe bring in HR, so.
Other than money, what do you feel motivates people on the job, and what motivates you to put forth your greatest effort?
So I think one of the strong suits of the Mattapoisett staff is their ethic towards customer service. They really want to provide great service to the patrons. So that's a motivating factor, is to see people leave the library happy. There's a lot of talk about how can we make it that they don't leave the library in an unsatisfactory way, unhappily. So, we try to do the best we can around the policies that we're given, or that we make. And so, doing our best to ensure that it's a good experience for everybody walking through the doors of the library. And I think that's very motivating for this staff. And what motivates me is just providing good service as well, and being a good leader to my staff. I think it's important to show good leadership, especially to those who may be moving up in the ranks and thinking about being a director at some point.
What would you, on the same vein, what would you be looking for? I guess what would make you happy if you were chosen as the candidate here? What would make you happy as far as that, hey, I'm glad I'm in Lakeville, so to speak, as far as working at the library?
Making sure that the staff is happy as well. It's important to keep up staff morale, especially if the staff works well together already. If there's no issues, you want to make sure that's maintained. And knowing that they're feeling fulfilled in their job and providing good customer service, and I'm enabling that would be a big factor for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you describe one or two of your greatest professional accomplishments and your greatest disappointments, both sides of the
Okay.
scale?
So I guess for a greatest professional accomplishment would go back to Plymouth for the teen space. There was no teen space, so we applied for an LSTA grant, and we were able to carve out a space for the teens. There had been previously not a lot of attention paid to teens, and I was able to help them move in a better direction, focusing on teen services, getting a person who's dedicated to teen services within the children's department, and then continuing on with their volunteering, the teen advisory board, getting that going. So I think that's one of my greatest accomplishments. And what was the other part
Well,
of
the one was the opposite. What was your
Op-
greatest disappointment?
greatest disappointment? So I think one of my greatest disappointments has been not, actually it's ongoing, is not being able to do much about some of the space issues in Mattapoisett. I feel like there could be some, if I had more time, I could focus on it, but I haven't been able to really put a plan together for how to, make some storage space in our mezzanine area, getting stuff out of the attic. A lot of it needs to be cleaned out, and I feel like I haven't been able to devote enough time. So that's been one disappointment so far, is like not devoting enough time and wanting to be able to do so, but also
Flood the
feeling,
building, helps
Yeah, I know. So we had it flooded. I need to clean everything out, but just not. Every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, there's so much to be done. It almost feels like insurmountable in a way too, because there's so much that needs to come out, and it's a personal sore spot.
Their library's been in one place for a long time, right?
Yeah, since 19.
See, we moved here in 2005, so we don't have a lot of stuff, like eons of time.
Oh, you'd be amazed, I'm sure.
It's
I
quite
I know
amazing
what's
how
up
much
in the
there
attic, and there's not
is
a
to
lot of
go.
space up there, and Jamie's done some culling too for us, so that.
It's hard, especially when you come into a situation where the previous director held on to a lot of things and just they kind of got put into the office or put into the attic. And I'm not saying it's bad, it's just difficult to then pull back from that and say, okay, we don't really need this, we don't really need that.
And now there's so much more that you can find online, so the question of whether or not you actually keep a physical element, or it goes to the museum or something like that,
Right,
It's
and if the
difficult.
museum is full too, what are you gonna do? And it's just, it's hard to make those decisions, and I feel like I haven't been able to do that very well with Mattapoisett.
Okay. Ruth?
What is important to you in a job?
Having a sense of satisfaction at the end of the day and feeling like I'm making a difference in some way, and it doesn't have to be a huge difference. Making somebody's day when you find them the perfect book to read or the information they had been searching for so many months, and you've been able to help them. I think that's really important. I never saw myself as a corporate job kind of person. I always knew I would be somehow involved in public service or doing something that's helpful. I'm sure corporations are helpful in their own way, but it was just not a job I could see myself doing. And really enjoyed, kind of fell into libraries and really enjoyed it and have stayed since.
What do you see as your role as library director in regards to the community, as far as getting out into the community, or do you do that in Mattapoisett right now, or?
I like to try doing that. I've partnered with some organizations for programming.
Mm-hmm.
I could probably do another thing I could probably do a lot better is get down there for big events. But a lot of times I'm working when they just had a fall festival on Saturday. I was at the library working. But trying to be present in a lot of these community meetings or I visited the Women's Club to talk. So getting out into different organizations is important to me. as well as being welcoming to town committees and other town-related departments so that they feel like they can come to the library for anything. Right now, we're working with veterans to scan some documents related to military history so that they can, they have a place where they know they can scan those documents easily. So working with departments, I think, is important as well.
Yes. And then what's a question you thought we would ask and we didn't, and how would you answer it?
Question I thought you would ask. I think last time I said something about dealing with a difficult patron.
We can use that one again.
Yeah. I know, it's hard to think because you've asked me a lot of different questions. You asked me a lot last time about capital. I'm surprised that didn't come up again. Capital projects.
I wasn't there for the
Yeah.
search committee, so.
Yeah, it was a couple questions about capital-related projects, so I'm surprised that capital things didn't come up again.
Well, how would you handle it?
How would I handle
We
capital
didn't hear your
projects? Well,
answers, so.
I think, I did get a good sense that there are some issues like the HVAC and roof, I wrote down, irrigation system. So, just taking a look at some of the things that have been identified as needing attention, calling the right companies or experts to figure out what is needed, and then formulating a plan to put it in the capital.
We have
request.
a building person now, which we didn't have until this past year. It's like, I think it's almost a year that he's been with us. And so he isn't the person you have to call, so you don't have to do all of that. And sometimes, depending on what his budget's like and what the issue is, sometimes he can take care of it, or we have to go out to bid or
Oh,
something like
that's
that.
nice, yeah.
So he is going to be doing a lot of that. So it's getting on the list and having a good relationship with him, which I think, so he's been here because we've had some issues with our fire alarm, with our security thing, which got fixed. We have a leak someplace, but we also are getting close to that 20 years of the roof.
Mhm.
And we have peaks and valleys, and sometimes it might just be some goo that's got to be put in to fix something, but it might also be a shingle thing that we're dealing with. So all of these things are going to be coming up here but a lot of that he will be handling. So it will be different because the previous two directors had to do everything, because we did have a building commissioner, but he was also doing other stuff, so they worked together. But it's not the same when you have a designated person who's spearheading things and looking at all the buildings in town. So we're fortunate that Mr. Nee is now with us, so that's really good.
That is good.
And he's been very helpful here with Teresa running managing the day stuff. So, yeah. So this is the time when we can ask her to ask us questions?
If we want.
Yeah.
I mean.
So we're going to ask you if you have any questions for
I
us.
do have a couple. So in terms of the schedule, what is the ideal schedule you would see as the director having? Is it when the library is open, or?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we will offer her the position and see what happens. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.